The padlock wasn't mine. I knew it the second I saw it gleaming in the morning sun, dangling smugly from the latch of my driveway gate like a tiny chrome insult. The lock was brand new, thick, and clearly expensive, something a person buys when they want to make a point, not secure property. My truck sat idling behind the gate, the engine low and annoyed, waiting for me to leave for work. I cut the ignition, got out, and stared at the shiny lock like it had personally declared war. For a long moment I thought maybe it was a prank. Then I spotted the note fluttering on the gate. Community Rule Enforcement in Progress. Contact the HOA before tampering. Signed, in neat cursive, Karen Whitmore, President. Of course, Karen, the self-appointed queen of the Maple Ridge Estates, HOA. The same woman who'd complained that my grass was too enthusiastically green, that my wind chimes produced invasive tones, and that my recycling bins were visually disruptive. She lived 2 houses over and seemed to run the neighborhood like a dictator whose army consisted of gossip and clipboards. I called her immediately. She picked up on the second ring, already mid-sigh. "Oh, good morning, Mr. Daniels. I see you noticed the lock." "Yeah," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "Hard to miss. Why's my driveway blocked?" "Your gate violates Article 6, Section C of the Exterior Uniformity Code. You installed a private lock last month without board approval." "I installed a latch," I corrected, "to keep my dogs in." She made a little laugh that somehow sounded like a threat. "Semantics. You didn't submit a request. Consider this an educational measure." "An educational? Wait, you locked me out of my own property to teach me a lesson?" "Exactly. Perhaps next time you'll respect the process." I took a deep breath and stared at the lock, imagining the sound it would make if I hit it with my sledgehammer. "So how do I get my truck out?" "You can't," she said simply. "Not until you file the proper paperwork. The board meets Friday." It was Tuesday. "Karen," I said slowly, "you realize you've just unlawfully restricted access to my property?" She gave a soft, patronizing hum. "You're overreacting. It's only temporary. Besides, if you truly cared about following community standards, you'd appreciate a reminder." I hung up before I said something that would get me fined for verbal misconduct. Standing there, I felt that peculiar blend of fury and disbelief that only homeowners under an HOA truly know. Who even thinks they can padlock another person's gate? Who looks at a latch and sees a crime scene? I called a locksmith, but he refused to touch it once he saw the HOA enforcement note. "Sorry, man," he said. "If I cut this, they'll come after me for property damage." I drove my old ATV around the side yard, through the mud path I usually reserve for yard waste, and went to work that way. The sight of me bouncing down the shoulder of Maple Ridge Lane at 7 a.m. probably ruined a few neighbors' coffee. When I got home that evening, there she was, Karen herself, standing proudly beside the locked gate like a warden inspecting her prison. "Evening," I said, stepping off the ATV. "Mr. Daniels," she greeted, smile thin as fishing line. "I hope today was productive." "Oh, it was. I found 3 people who think you've lost your mind." She pursed her lips. "Sarcasm won't help you. If you keep circumventing the gate, we'll have to escalate enforcement." "Enforcement? You mean trespassing on my property again?" Her expression didn't flicker. "It's not trespassing when acting in an official HOA capacity." I laughed. "That's not how law works, Karen." She adjusted her sunglasses even though the sun had already dipped behind the houses. "Rules are rules, Mr. Daniels. We must protect neighborhood standards. If everyone installed whatever gates or locks they pleased, chaos would ensue." "What chaos? Is someone losing sleep over my fence latch?" "It's about precedent," she said crisply. "Discipline. Community image." It struck me then. Karen wasn't motivated by malice, at least not entirely. She was motivated by control, by the intoxicating feeling of being the one who gets to say no. So I smiled. "All right. You win. I'll file the paperwork." Her posture softened just slightly. I'm glad to hear it. That's very mature of you. And you'll remove the lock when I do? Of course, she said, and left with the self-satisfied stride of a monarch whose subject had just bowed. That night, I walked the property line under my motion light. I noticed how she'd even zip-tied the lock note to my gate in plastic so rain wouldn't ruin her message. That tiny act of care told me everything about the woman. She wanted permanence in her dominance. What's the best way to handle someone who mistakes cruelty for order? Do you fight fire with fire or cement? The next morning, I went to Home Depot. I told the cashier I was pouring a small repair patch for my driveway. I bought 2 bags of Quikrete, a trowel, and a bucket. When I got home, I mixed the cement by the gate, humming softly. I didn't break the padlock. I simply removed the latch screws so the gate swung open again. Then I dug a shallow square at the base of the post and poured a fresh bed of wet concrete. As the mixture settled, I dropped something shiny into the center. Karen's spare keyring. I'd borrowed them, temporarily, from her mailbox slot earlier that morning while she was on her neighborhood inspection walk. She kept them labeled: storage unit, HOA office, pool gate, and the shiny gold one marked lock. The woman practically gift-wrapped her own comeuppance. I pushed them down with the trowel, leveled the surface, and let the gray water glisten in the sun. When it hardened, I replaced the gate latch. The lock was still there, hanging like a decoration, but its key now lived permanently beneath the concrete. By lunchtime, I heard her voice from across the cul-de-sac. "Excuse me." She marched up the sidewalk in khaki capris and indignation. "Did you move the lock?" "Nope," I said cheerfully. "Just opened my gate. Turns out it wasn't that secure. You tampered with enforcement property." I repaired my fence. She stepped closer, inspecting the post. Her eyes landed on the smooth, pale rectangle of fresh concrete. "What's this?" "Foundation work," I said lightly. "You know, for stability." Her brow furrowed. "That wasn't here yesterday. Must have been settling issues." She squinted, suspicious but unsure. "You can't just alter shared boundary structures." "Funny," I said. "You mean like locking them without consent?" Her jaw tightened. "You're accumulating violations, Mr. Daniels. I'm warning you." "Are you?" I said, tilting my head. "Or are you bluffing again?" The question seemed to throw her off. She sputtered something about bylaws and retreated, clearly uneasy. That evening, I sat on my porch with a beer and watched her from afar. She tried every key on her chain before realizing the one she wanted was gone. Then came the dawning horror, the frantic pocket searches, the pacing. Finally she stomped back toward her house, phone in hand, probably calling the same locksmith who'd refused to help me. I smiled into my drink. Sometimes karma doesn't need years. Sometimes it just needs a bag of cement and good timing. But as the night deepened, a thought gnawed at me. What would she do when she realized her authority had literally been buried? Would she escalate? File reports? Bring the HOA board down on me? I knew Karen well enough to expect it. People like her don't retreat, they reload. So I waited for the next move, the next ridiculous twist in this suburban chess game. How far would she go to reassert control? How far was I willing to push back? And when does petty revenge stop being harmless and start becoming something more permanent? The answers, I figured, would arrive by morning. The knock came at 6:45 a.m. Not a normal knock either. This one had rhythm, 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 2 more. The kind of pattern that announces authority, or at least someone who desperately wants to project it. I opened my front door to find Karen standing there with 2 other people, a man in a blazer clutching a clipboard and a woman wearing an expression that could curdle milk. "Good morning, Mr. Daniels," Karen said brightly. "We're here on official HOA business." I blinked at the entourage. "Wow, you brought backup this time. Am I being audited or exorcised?" The man cleared his throat. "I'm Richard Bowman, HOA Vice President. We received a report of property alteration and possible vandalism. I looked at Karen, who was staring past me into my house like she expected to find a black market concrete factory inside. "Ah," I said. "You must mean the scandalous case of the missing lock key." Her smile didn't move, but her jaw tightened. "Don't play dumb, Mr. Daniels. Someone tampered with the enforcement lock and poured unauthorized concrete on community soil." "Community soil? That's my fence post." "Your post touches shared visual space," she snapped. "Then I guess your eyes owe me rent." Richard stepped in before she combusted. "Let's keep things civil. We're just here to document any potential violations. May we take a look at the gate?" "Be my guest," I said, gesturing dramatically toward the driveway. We walked there together. The padlock still gleamed, useless and smug. The concrete at the base had cured perfectly overnight, smooth, pale, uncracked. Karen crouched down, inspecting it like a detective at a crime scene. "This was wet yesterday," she said. "There are trowel marks." "Possibly from when I stabilized the post," I said. "You know, after someone's unauthorized lock made me remove hardware to open it." Her voice jumped an octave. "You're admitting tampering." "I'm admitting basic property maintenance. Should I get my contractor license framed?" Richard sighed. "Okay, both of you, stop. Karen, there's no visible damage. Mr. Daniels, if you did perform alterations, please submit a retroactive form so we can review compliance." Karen looked like he'd just betrayed her to the enemy. "We can't let this slide. He buried the lock's access key. Do you have proof of that?" I asked innocently. She hesitated. Of course she didn't. "Let's not jump to conclusions," Richard said. "We'll review the incident in Friday's meeting." Karen huffed but eventually followed him back down the sidewalk. She threw me one last look over her shoulder, half fury, half confusion, as if she couldn't decide whether to find me or salute me. When they were gone, I locked my gate from inside, my lock, not hers, and went to work again via the ATV path. But I could feel the tension humming beneath the surface. I'd humiliated her, and people like Karen don't forgive that. They strategize. By Wednesday afternoon, the next move arrived in my mailbox. A bright orange HOA violation notice. Unapproved construction, refusal to comply with enforcement, and my favorite, obstruction of HOA authority. Each infraction carried a $250 fine. I laughed out loud right there in my driveway. At the bottom, there was a note in pen: "Non-payment will result in property lien." And in smaller writing, her signature, Karen W. I pinned the notice to my fridge like a trophy. That evening, my neighbor, Sam, wandered over from across the street. He's a retired mechanic with a habit of appearing exactly when you need either advice or beer. "Heard the Queen made a scene again," he said, handing me a cold bottle. "She's escalating," I said. "Sent me a triple fine for fixing my own fence." Sam took a sip. "You know, she locked my mailbox once because I had a political sticker she didn't like. Claimed it violated visual neutrality. I just cut the lock off." "And she didn't fine you?" He grinned. "Nah. I told her my cousin's a lawyer." "Total lie, but it worked." I smirked. "Maybe I should start printing fake legal letterheads." "Or," he said, lowering his voice, "you could hit her where it hurts. The bylaws. Those things are written like the Bible, contradictions everywhere. Find one, you win." That idea simmered in my head all night. If she wanted to play by the book, I'd make her choke on the book. So I did some reading. I spent the next evening on the HOA's online portal, scanning PDF after PDF. Article 6, Section C, the one she'd quoted, did mention unapproved gate modifications, but it also said the HOA may not obstruct access to personal property under any circumstance. Interesting. Even better, Article 11 stated that any enforcement measure must be approved by a board quorum and communicated in writing before action is taken. Meaning, Karen couldn't have locked my gate without a vote. By the time Friday's meeting rolled around, I had printed copies of both sections and highlighted them like a college student cramming for revenge. The HOA meetings were held in the clubhouse, a sterile little building with coffee urns, beige walls, and the faint smell of chlorine from the nearby pool. The board sat at a long folding table. About a dozen residents sat in metal chairs, whispering. I took a seat in the back, waiting for my name to be called. Karen presided like a judge in a small-town courtroom. Next on the agenda, she announced, is the matter of Mr. Daniels and the unauthorized gate construction. I raised my hand. You mean the crime of existing on my property? A few neighbors snickered. Karen's eyes flashed. This is a formal setting, Mr. Daniels. Then let's be formal, I said, standing. Before you accuse me of violations, maybe we should review your own. The room went still. She tried to recover. Excuse me. I walked to the front and placed the printed bylaws on the table. You quoted Article 6, Section C to justify locking my gate. But you ignored Article 11, which requires a board vote for enforcement. Did you get one? Richard shifted uncomfortably. Well, we didn't convene officially. Karen acted on behalf of. So she acted alone, I said. Without quorum approval. That makes the lock an illegal enforcement action. Karen's face turned red. I was executing my duties. By trespassing on private property and restricting egress? The bylaws say that's prohibited. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sam was grinning like a proud uncle in the back row. Karen slammed her gavel. Yes, she had a gavel, on the table. Enough. You cannot lecture this board. Richard cleared his throat. Actually, he's right, Karen. Procedure requires a vote. Her mouth fell open. You're siding with him? I'm siding with the rules, he said quietly. For a few long seconds, she said. Nothing. Then she straightened, composed but seething. Fine. The lock will be removed. But Mr. Daniels still poured unauthorized concrete. I smiled. Happy to fill out the form retroactively, as long as you waive the fines that were based on your mistake. The silence that followed was pure, unfiltered victory. Richard nodded. That seems reasonable. Karen's voice cracked. We can't just. Motion to dismiss the fines, he said quickly. All in favor? Hands went up, 7 of them. All opposed. Just Karen. The motion passed. I sat down, pretending to check my phone while inside I was practically levitating. The meeting moved on to someone's fence color dispute, but I barely heard it. When it ended, Karen cornered me outside. Her tone was sugar, but her eyes were knives. You think you're clever, don't you? I don't think, I said. I read. She stepped closer. This isn't over. You embarrassed me in front of my board. Maybe you shouldn't have given me homework, I said. I'm a fast learner. She leaned in. You buried my authority. I smiled. Among other things. Her eyes flickered, she knew. Or at least suspected. But before she could say more, Richard called her back to the clubhouse, and she left with a tight smile that promised retaliation. As I walked home, I couldn't help but wonder, what's her next move? Would she play dirtier now that public humiliation had failed? Would she try to make me crack first? I looked at my smooth concrete post gleaming in the porch light and thought, maybe I'd already poured her breaking point. Or maybe I'd just given her a reason to dig. Karen didn't retaliate immediately. That was the unnerving part. For 3 entire days after the meeting, she was quiet, too quiet. No notes on my door, no fresh fines, no passive-aggressive community reminders slipped into my mailbox. It was like the eye of a storm had rolled directly over my property. And anyone who's ever lived near an HOA Karen knows that silence doesn't mean peace. It means plotting. By Monday morning, I found out what she'd been plotting. A city inspection notice was taped to my gate. Property under review for potential zoning violations, it read. The notice bore the official city seal and an assigned case number. Someone, wonder who, had reported unlicensed construction occurring on my premises. I almost laughed. She'd escalated from HOA bylaws to city code. That was a new frontier of pettiness. When the inspector showed up that afternoon, I met him at the driveway. He was a middle-aged guy named Frank with a sun-faded clipboard and a look that said he'd seen it all. "Got a report about unauthorized concrete work," he said, eyeing the post. "Yep," I said. I patched a fence support. "1 bag of Quikrete. You drove all the way out for that." He looked embarrassed. "Honestly? We get a few of these every week. Same neighborhood, same person. Karen, I guess." He grinned. "That's the one. Calls us more than the police department. Does she ever win?" He shrugged. "Sometimes. Depends how bored the department is." I handed him my printed receipts from Home Depot. "Here. Bought legally. Poured within property lines. No structure expansion, no plumbing, no electrical. Want to measure it?" He chuckled. "You're good. I'll close the case." "Appreciate it, Frank." As he turned to leave, he said, "Word of advice. Whatever you did to tick her off, maybe undo it." I smiled. "I'd rather frame it." After he left, I noticed Karen peeking through her blinds across the street. She ducked back as soon as I waved. That night, I got an email from the HOA's community portal. Notice of hearing, continued non-compliance review, Friday 7 p.m. The timing was suspiciously perfect. Barely enough notice for anyone else on the board to prepare, but plenty for her to rally whoever still supported her. She was regrouping, likely to try a power play. So I prepared too. I printed not just the bylaws this time but the HOA's founding charter, which stated that all board actions must serve the mutual benefit and peaceful enjoyment of homeowners. I also dug into the county property records. Guess what I found? Karen had technically extended her backyard fence 2 feet beyond her boundary line 6 years ago. No permit. I didn't plan to use that info unless I had to, but it was comforting knowing I could. Friday came and the clubhouse was full, standing room only. The Daniels vs. HOA feud had apparently become neighborhood entertainment. Karen opened the meeting with a practiced calm. "Tonight we'll revisit the issue of Mr. Daniels's ongoing noncompliance and community disruption. We have received multiple complaints." She gestured to a small pile of printed emails on the table. Probably all written by her under different Gmail accounts. I raised my hand. "Before we begin, can we confirm whether this is an official disciplinary hearing or another one of your hobby lectures?" "Watch your tone," she snapped. "You're here as a respondent, not a participant." "I'm a dues-paying member," I said. "That makes me both." A few laughs rippled from the back row. She glared at them. Richard, the vice president, looked weary. "Karen, maybe let him respond." "Fine," she said tightly. "Mr. Daniels, explain why you continue to antagonize this board." "Because this board," I said evenly, "has one member who mistakes control for governance. I repaired my property. You locked it. I followed the bylaws. You violated them. I proved it. You tried to bury me in fines. Then when that failed, you called the city. If anyone here's antagonizing, it isn't me." Gasps and whispers spread across the room. Karen's nostrils flared. "This man," she declared, "has shown repeated disrespect toward community authority. He mocks the rules, the board, and me personally." "Only because it's mutual," I said. "And by the way, the city inspector cleared me. You can check the case file." Richard looked intrigued. "He did?" "Yep. Said this neighborhood keeps him busy, thanks to someone's chronic dial finger." Even a few board members smiled at that. Karen slammed her gavel again. "This is outrageous. We can't let one homeowner undermine the structure that holds this community together." "Structure's fine," I said. "Leadership's cracking." Her voice rose. "You think you're clever, but your smugness will cost you, Mr. Daniels. This neighborhood thrives on order, not rebellion. And yet," I said quietly, "you're the only one who keeps creating chaos." That line landed hard. Even Richard looked at her differently. I could tell she was unraveling. Her voice got louder, faster. Do you realize how much time I've invested in this community? The late nights, the reports, the coordination? I'm not the villain here. I'm the reason this neighborhood hasn't fallen apart. Funny, I said. It didn't start falling apart until you started locking gates. Her hand trembled as she pointed at me. You're finished here. I'll make sure of it. Richard stood. Karen, that's enough. No, it's not, she snapped. He needs consequences. Richard sighed. Then maybe we should discuss your conduct too. The room went dead quiet. What are you implying? She asked, voice suddenly small. You acted without board approval. You called the city without authorization. You've used your position to target a homeowner personally. That's abuse of power, Karen. She stared at him like he'd stabbed her in the back. You're turning on me? I'm holding you accountable, he said. It was over right then. Everyone knew it. The rest of the meeting dissolved into awkward silence, followed by a motion to adjourn for review. No votes, no gavel. Karen just sat there, rigid, pale, blinking too fast. As I walked out, I half expected her to lunge at me. Instead, she whispered, You think you've won. But people like me don't lose. We reset. That sentence stuck in my head all night. Reset. It sounded less like a threat and more like a promise. The next morning, something felt off. My sprinklers were running, even though the timer was set to off. My motion lights were blinking randomly. Then I noticed the small security camera on my fence had been rotated toward the ground. Karen had been in my yard again. That's when the line between HOA feud and personal war officially vanished. I checked my security footage from the night before. Sure enough, at 2:43 a.m., a silhouette in a windbreaker walked along my fence line. The posture, the hair, the habit of looking around like a spy in a suburban soap opera, it was unmistakably Karen. She'd trespassed again. What kind of person breaks into someone's yard twice, after already being humiliated? One with something to prove. One who can't stand losing control. I considered calling the police, but I didn't want to play defense anymore. If she wanted a reset, I'd give her one. That afternoon, I bought a fresh bag of concrete, a cheap motion alarm, and a fake under repair sign. I set up a small section of my driveway near the gate, roped off with tape. The trap wasn't physical, it was psychological. I wanted her to see that fresh wet gray surface and think, he's doing it again. Because I knew she couldn't resist interfering. At midnight, the motion alarm buzzed. I peeked through the blinds. There she was, in a bathrobe and sneakers, flashlight in hand, crouching near the taped-off section. She leaned closer, squinting. Then she reached down, testing it. Her hand went straight into the cement mixture. She gasped, stumbled, and tried to wipe it off, but the mixture was sticky and half-set. She panicked, wiping her hand on her robe, leaving gray smears everywhere. Then she froze as she realized my floodlight had turned on. We locked eyes through the glass. Her expression shifted from shock to fury to humiliation in 3 seconds flat. She fled into the darkness, robe flapping behind her like a cape of defeat. I waited until morning to clean up. The trap had worked perfectly. Later that day, a new email arrived from the HOA board, this time signed by Richard. Effective immediately, President Whitmore is on administrative suspension pending review. I smiled, closed my laptop, and walked out to the driveway. The sun caught the faint gray stains on the pavement where she'd touched it. Poetic symmetry, I thought. The woman who'd locked my gate to teach me a lesson had now literally fallen into my cement again, this time with both hands. But something told me she wasn't done. People like Karen don't vanish quietly. They regroup. And whatever came next, it was going to be loud. I thought suspension would end her reign. It didn't. Karen disappeared for a few days after the HOA board announced her administrative leave, and the neighborhood exhaled. People mowed their lawns in peace, parked however they wanted for once, even left trash cans out overnight without fear of a fine. It felt like summer vacation after a year of detention. But quiet isn't Karen's natural state. On the 5th day, she returned with allies. I saw her walking the cul-de-sac that morning with 2 women I barely recognized, both wearing matching Maple Ridge Beautification Committee shirts that looked suspiciously homemade. She wasn't carrying her clipboard anymore. Now she had a camera phone, snapping photos of lawns, fences, driveways. Rebranding herself, I realized. When power gets revoked, people like her just rename it. Later that afternoon, I found an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a letter on plain paper that read, "Dear Resident, the Beautification Committee has noted potential eyesore conditions on your property: driveway patchwork, non-uniform fence color, visible camera wiring. Please address these issues promptly to maintain community standards. With appreciation, the Maple Ridge Beautification Committee. Chair, Karen Whitmore." No HOA letterhead, no signature from Richard, nothing official. Just Karen, trying to resurrect her throne with a new crown. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. But beneath the humor, irritation simmered. She couldn't just stop. That night, I called Richard. "She's creating fake committees now," I said. He groaned. "You're not the first to call. She's got 3 neighbors convinced she's running a sanctioned subcommittee. The board didn't approve anything." "Then maybe you should tell her that." "I already did," he said. "She claimed it's an independent volunteer group, not HOA affiliated. Technically she can do it, free speech, community engagement, whatever. But it's chaos. Chaos is her favorite hobby." Richard sighed. "Look, off the record, we're voting next week to remove her permanently. But she doesn't know that yet. Try not to provoke her until then." "Provoking her's never my plan," I said. "She just keeps volunteering for it." I hung up and stared out at my driveway, still faintly marked by her last humiliation. The concrete looked smooth under the porch light, solid, permanent, calm. It made me smile. But then, in the back of my mind, a new worry began to form. If she was taking photos of properties again, she might not be satisfied with sending letters. She needed spectacle, an audience, a win. And she'd want it at my expense. Sure enough, the next morning, a flatbed truck rolled into the cul-de-sac. On it sat 6 giant planters overflowing with red geraniums, each one labeled Community Enhancement, Do Not Remove. The truck driver looked confused when I approached him. "Hey, these are for you," he asked. "Nope," I said. "Never ordered a garden invasion." He handed me a slip. "Says delivery for beautification project. Paid in cash by a Ms. Whitmore." Of course. By the time the driver unloaded the planters, Karen appeared, arms folded, triumphant. "A little greenery to uplift the neighborhood," she announced loudly, making sure half the block heard her. "On my property line?" I asked. "Technically the curb belongs to the community," she said. "So, yes, adjacent installations are permissible. Except that curb is still in front of my gate." She smiled sweetly. "Then you'll be the first to enjoy them." "You're welcome." I stared at the row of massive flower planters now blocking half my driveway. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. First the lock, now this. Every move she made was about control disguised as order. "Karen," I said calmly, "move them." She tilted her head. "No." That single syllable landed like a gavel strike. I took a step closer. "You're trespassing again. This is harassment." "Oh, stop dramatizing," she said. "You've been a thorn in this community for months. I'm merely restoring balance." "By planting barricades? By setting an example." I exhaled slowly. "Okay, fine. Let's play your game." I walked inside, grabbed my toolbox, and came back with a tape measure, camera, and notepad. I measured the curb precisely, marking each planter's distance from the official boundary line on the city map I'd printed weeks earlier. Then I photographed everything. Karen frowned. "What are you doing?" "Documenting your contribution to the community aesthetic. Code enforcement will love it." Her eyes widened. You wouldn't. I already did when you called them on me. She opened her mouth to argue, but just then Sam wandered over again, coffee in hand. What's all this? Karen's bringing nature to my driveway, I said. Sam squinted at the planters. Looks like she's planting evidence. A few neighbors chuckled. Karen's face reddened. Laugh all you want, she snapped. When these flowers win next month's Neighborhood Beautification Award, we'll see who's ridiculous. You give yourself awards now? Sam asked. Someone has to, she said proudly. By evening, I'd filed a report with the city's community maintenance office. 2 days later, a municipal worker showed up with a measuring wheel and clipboard, déjà vu for everyone watching. After a brief inspection, he knocked on my door. Those planters are on private frontage, he said. We'll need to issue a removal order. I smiled. You'll get no argument from me. He taped the bright orange notice to one of the planters and left. 5 minutes later, Karen came storming over, waving the paper. You reported me. I didn't report you, I said. I reported illegal installations. She glared. You're a menace to progress. Funny, progress usually moves forward, not into people's driveways. Her hands shook. You'll regret this. Already do, I said, and shut the door. That night she retaliated again, subtler this time. My mailbox flag disappeared, snapped clean off. My trash can was turned sideways with its lid missing. Someone had written "too green" in chalk on my fence, a callback to her first ever complaint about my lawn. She wasn't fighting fair anymore. I decided to end it properly. No more sarcastic remarks, no more letting her control the narrative. The next morning, I gathered every letter, photo, and incident report I'd saved, months of evidence, and organized it into a binder labeled HOA Harassment Documentation. Then I scheduled a meeting with Richard and 2 other board members at the clubhouse. When I walked in with the binder, they looked tired. Please tell me this isn't another round of the same drama, Richard said. Depends, I said. Do you want it resolved or just quieted? He rubbed his temples. Resolved, ideally. I dropped the binder on the table with a thud. Then remove her permanently. This contains proof of harassment, trespassing, unauthorized enforcement, and defamation. She's turned a homeowners association into her personal kingdom. Either you take her crown away, or I'll take this to the city attorney. The other 2 board members exchanged glances. One of them flipped open the binder, scanning the photos. She's been crossing lines, she admitted. Literally. Richard nodded slowly. We'll make it official tonight. No appeal. I exhaled. Good. You'll thank me later. Walking home, I felt lighter. The war was ending, and for once I hadn't needed a sledgehammer or sarcasm, just facts. But peace, as I'd learned, never lasts long in Maple Ridge. At midnight, I woke to the sound of a truck engine outside. I looked through the blinds and froze. A tow truck was backing up to my driveway. For a heartbeat, I thought it was a dream. Then I saw her, Karen, standing beside it, arms folded, directing the driver. She was towing my truck. I rushed outside barefoot. Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing? The driver looked startled. Ma'am said it was blocking community access. It's in my driveway. Karen's voice rang out, calm and venomous. Technically, the planters constitute a community project. Your vehicle obstructs the beautification zone. I laughed in disbelief. You're certifiable. She stepped closer, eyes wild. You destroyed my reputation. You humiliated me. I'm taking back control. By committing grand theft auto? By restoring balance. I held up my phone. You're on camera, Karen. Every second of this. Her face paled. You wouldn't dare post. Try me. The tow driver looked between us, then sighed and unhooked the chains. Lady, I'm not getting involved in whatever this is. He drove off, leaving her standing there trembling with rage. For the first time, she didn't yell. She just whispered, "You'll pay for this," and stormed off into the night. The next morning, I sent the footage to the HOA board and the police. By noon, I got a reply from Richard, "Thank you for the evidence. Effective immediately, Karen Whitmore's HOA membership is revoked. Legal counsel will follow up regarding her conduct." Finally, I thought. But as I looked down my driveway at the faint tire marks, I couldn't shake one thought. Karen might have lost her title, her planters, and her keys, but she still had one thing left: a grudge. And in Maple Ridge, grudges don't just fade. They bloom. You'd think being officially expelled from the HOA would have stopped her. It didn't. Karen treated her removal like an exile from royalty, one she intended to reverse. Within 48 hours, she launched a full-blown redemption campaign. Hand-delivered flyers appeared on every doorstep in Maple Ridge titled, "The Truth About the HOA Coup." Each flyer was 3 pages long, printed in dramatic fonts, and filled with words like corruption, negligence, and sabotage. According to her version, I had manipulated the weak-willed board, using misleading evidence and personal vendettas. She painted herself as a misunderstood guardian of community values. My favorite part was where she called me a known instigator with a pattern of property-related aggression. I read it 3 times because it was too ridiculous to take in all at once. Then I tossed it in the fireplace and watched it curl to ash. The neighborhood wasn't buying it either. Sam texted me later that morning, "Got her flyer. Framed it next to my live, laugh, lawn sign." Still, I couldn't relax. Karen's behavior had shifted from petty to unpredictable, and unpredictable people are dangerous. That week, strange things began happening. My mail arrived opened, every envelope resealed with cheap tape. My Wi-Fi router reset itself twice in one night. A pile of mulch mysteriously appeared in my yard with no invoice or delivery record. It wasn't damaging, just invasive. Like someone reminding me they could reach into my life whenever they wanted. One evening, I found her walking down the sidewalk opposite my house, muttering into her phone. I stepped outside. "Evening, Karen. Planning your next committee." She froze mid-stride, her voice suddenly syrupy sweet. "Just enjoying my constitutional right to walk in a public space." Of course. I'd hate to obstruct your beautification campaign. Her eyes flicked toward my security camera and then back to me. "You think recording people keeps you safe?" "It keeps me honest," I said. "Can't say the same for everyone." She smiled in that eerie, tight way that doesn't reach the eyes. "You won't see me coming next time." That wasn't a threat shouted in anger. It was spoken like a promise, soft and deliberate. It chilled me more than any screaming match ever could. That night I double-checked every lock, every light, every motion sensor. I didn't sleep much. By morning, I decided to go proactive. If Karen wanted to escalate, I'd remove the field she was playing on. First, I upgraded my security cameras to a cloud-based system with remote alert. Then I bought a heavy-duty smart lock for the gate. The same gate that had started it all. Poetic, really. I even added a tamper alarm that would trigger if anyone touched the latch for more than 5 seconds. Sam helped me install it. "Feels like we're fortifying a castle," he said, screwing in the last bracket. "Castles attract sieges," I said. "Might as well build strong walls." He laughed. "Think she'll try anything else?" "Karen doesn't stop until someone makes her." And that's exactly what I planned to do. That evening, as I tested the gate's lock mechanism, my phone buzzed with a notification. "Motion detected, side yard." I opened the feed. There she was again. Karen, dressed in black this time, creeping along the fence line like a teenager in a bad spy movie. She had a flashlight, but it was dim, like she was trying to stay unnoticed. I hit record. She paused near the old concrete post, the one where her keys still lay buried, and crouched down. She touched the surface, running her fingers across it. Then she pulled something from her pocket, a small hammer. "Unbelievable," I whispered. She started chipping at the concrete, slow and careful. It took her 3 hits to realize it wasn't budging. Then she swung harder, frustration visible even through the grainy night vision. The alarm triggered, shrill and piercing. She jumped like she'd been electrocuted, dropped the hammer, and stumbled backward into the mud. I stepped outside with a flashlight of my own. "Looking for something?" I called. Her head snapped up. For a moment she looked feral, hair wild, eyes wide. Then, like flipping a switch, she straightened and tried to compose herself. "I was checking damage. Community oversight." "At 1 in the morning?" She blinked rapidly. "You poured unapproved concrete here months ago." "I was ensuring structural integrity." I held up my phone, camera light glowing. "Say that again for the recording." Her expression curdled. "You think you're clever, don't you? You think this little camera makes you untouchable." "No," I said quietly. "It makes you visible." For a long second neither of us moved. Then she turned and marched away, shoes squelching in the mud, muttering curses I could barely hear. The next morning, I sent the footage to Richard with a short message. "Your suspended president tried to dig up my fence post last night." He replied within an hour. "Understood. I'll handle it. Don't engage her directly anymore." Good advice. Too bad she didn't follow it. 2 days later, she filed a police report accusing me of harassment and illegal surveillance. The officer who came to my door looked exhausted. "Sir, this is probably nothing, but we have to follow up," he said. "No problem," I said, pulling out my laptop. "Want to see her trying to excavate my property at 1 a.m.? He blinked. "You have footage?" "Full HD with timestamps." 5 minutes later, he was shaking his head. "All right, this clears you completely. If anything, it strengthens your case. She's lucky this isn't considered attempted vandalism." When he left, I sat on the porch and let the quiet settle. Birds chirped, the sprinkler hissed, a delivery van passed. It all felt so normal that for a moment I wondered if the nightmare was finally over. Then I noticed something small and silver glinting near the fence post. I went closer. It was the hammer she dropped that night. But taped to the handle was a note, written in her meticulous cursive. "You buried my keys. I'll bury your peace." I laughed, an actual, startled laugh that came out half disbelieving, half angry. She'd gone full melodrama. But still, that note sat on my desk like a curse for the rest of the day. By evening, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't waiting for another confrontation. I called Richard again. "She's escalating beyond HOA nonsense," I said. "Now it's criminal." He sighed. "We've forwarded everything to legal counsel. The city's considering a restraining order. You'll probably be contacted to testify." "Fine by me." Then, for the first time since this all began, he said something that made me pause. "You know, Daniel, she used to be decent. 10 years ago, she organized block parties, helped old folks shovel driveways. Then her husband left. After that, it was like she needed to control something, anything, to keep her world from falling apart." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to feel pity. The rest of me remembered every sleepless night she'd caused. "Some people rebuild," I said finally. "Others just start locking gates." That night I slept deeper than I had in weeks. Until 4 a.m., when my phone blared an alarm, motion detected, front yard. I opened the feed and froze. Flames. One of the planters she'd left by the curb months ago was on fire. Soil and flowers burning, orange glow reflecting off the fence. My heart thudded. I grabbed the extinguisher and ran outside. It wasn't a huge fire, more like someone had dumped lighter fluid and lit it for show, but it was enough to scorch the grass. I doused it, coughing in the smoke, and saw tire tracks leading away from the curb. I didn't need to guess whose car they belonged to. The next morning, the police came again. They took samples, measurements, asked questions. I gave them everything: video footage, timestamps, the note from the hammer. The officer nodded grimly. "We'll handle it. You did the right thing documenting everything." As they drove off, I looked at the charred spot on my lawn and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about fences or locks anymore. This was about control, fear, obsession. And if she wanted a final showdown, I was ready for one. Because I wasn't the same guy she'd locked out months ago. I'd learned her game, and now I knew exactly how to end it for good. The cement at the base of my gate had hardened long ago, but I realized the symbolism wasn't complete yet. It was time to bury something else. I woke up the next morning with a new sense of clarity. Something had shifted overnight. Maybe it was exhaustion curdling into resolve, or maybe it was the sight of the blackened planter that finally burned away my patience. Either way, I wasn't going to play defense anymore. The police had told me they'd handle it, but I knew how that went. Paperwork, reports, warnings, none of which ever stopped someone like Karen. People like her don't fear authority. They believe they are authority. The only language she understood was consequence, something visible, undeniable, and poetic. So I spent the morning making plans. First, I installed another camera, one she wouldn't see. I buried a small motion sensor in the flower bed near the fence where she'd tried digging last time. It synced directly to my phone and sent silent alert. Then I called a friend from my construction days, a guy named Marcus who owed me a favor. "You still have that leftover mix from the sidewalk job?" I asked. "Sure do," he said. "What are you patching?" "Let's just call it a lesson in permanence." By noon, he dropped off a few bags of industrial-grade cement. The heavy stuff, the kind that doesn't crack when someone tries to pry it up. As I unloaded the bags, Sam wandered over, as usual. "You building a bunker now?" "Not quite," I said. "Just reinforcing the gate." He frowned. "You really think she's coming back?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." He sighed. "You ever wonder why she's so obsessed with you?" "All the time," I admitted. "And the only answer I can think of is that I didn't break when she expected me to." "Some people can't stand not being in charge," Sam said. "You took her power, so she's trying to steal your peace instead." He wasn't wrong. But I had no intention of giving her that satisfaction. That night, I set my plan into motion. Under the floodlights, I poured fresh cement right where her burned planter had sat. I framed it with a wooden border and let the mixture spread smooth, clean, and level. Then, when it was half set, I pressed something into it, a small, flat metal tag I'd engraved that morning at the hardware store. The tag read, "Boundaries matter." Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. By the time the sun came up, the slab looked perfect, new, solid, final. I left it uncovered, knowing curiosity was stronger bait than any trap. And right on schedule, at 11:42 p.m. that night, the buried motion sensor buzzed on my phone. I turned on the feed. There she was again. Karen. Dressed in dark clothes, hair tied back, flashlight beam dancing across the new concrete. She crouched down, reading the tag. Then she stood up, furious, and began pacing like a caged animal. Finally, she pulled something from her purse, a hammer again. She was going to destroy it. But this time I was ready. I stepped outside, calm and deliberate, keeping my voice even. "You have a thing for my concrete, don't you?" She froze. The hammer slipped slightly in her hand. "You just don't stop, do you?" I could say the same. She turned toward me, eyes glinting. "You humiliated me. You stole my community. I built this place. I gave it order. And you turned everyone against me." "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." Her voice cracked. "I was this neighborhood. They came to me for help, for rules, for structure. Now they laugh behind my back. You think that's funny?" "I think it's tragic," I said honestly. "You wanted control because you lost it everywhere else." Her mouth twitched. "Don't psychoanalyze me, Daniel. I don't have to. You've done it for me." For a moment she looked small, shrunken beneath the porch light, shoulders trembling. But then the anger returned, burning away the vulnerability. "You'll regret crossing me," she hissed. "I'll make sure of it." "You already tried," I said. "With locks, fines, tow trucks, even fire. What's left?" Something flickered in her expression. Not guilt. Calculation. Then she raised the hammer. This ends tonight. I didn't flinch. It sure does. Before she could swing, a blinding white light washed over the yard. My floodlight system had activated, all 8 lamps at once. The motion sensor triggered them automatically, turning the driveway into daylight. She stumbled back, blinking furiously, disoriented. And then came the voice. Karen Whitmore. 2 police officers stepped out from the shadows by the curb, flashlights raised. She froze, mid-motion, hammer still in her hand. "Ma'am, drop the tool," one of them ordered. Her head whipped toward me. "You called them?" I shook my head. "Didn't need to. The motion alarm sends alerts directly to dispatch now. They set it up after the last report." For once, she looked genuinely shocked. You set me up." "No," I said. "You walked right into it." She hesitated for a split second too long. The officers moved in, taking the hammer and guiding her toward the curb. She didn't resist at first. Then, suddenly, she shouted, "He buried my keys! He buried my life!" The words echoed down the quiet street. Curtains twitched. Lights flicked on. Half the neighborhood watched as Karen, former HOA President, was led away in handcuffs, still ranting about cement and justice. I stood there, silent, heart pounding but steady. After they left, Sam appeared from his porch in pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Well," he said, "that's one way to end a feud." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it's just the cleanup phase." He gave a low whistle. "You gonna press charges?" "Not sure yet." "Then at least get that concrete sealed," he said, grinning. "Seems to attract her like a magnet." I chuckled, but his joke stuck with me. The next few days were blissfully quiet. The air felt different, lighter somehow. No surveillance notes, no shouting across the street, no fake committees. Karen's house sat dark except for the occasional flicker of a lamp. Word spread fast. She'd been released after an overnight hold but placed under a restraining order pending a court hearing. It should have felt like victory. But instead I felt hollow. I kept thinking about what she'd said before the police arrived, how she'd built this place, how she'd lost control. Somewhere in all that madness was a kernel of truth. Karen hadn't been born a tyrant. She'd been forged into one by loneliness, fear, and a craving for importance that the world had stopped giving her. And I'd crushed what was left of it under a layer of cement. Still, guilt didn't mean forgiveness. A week later, I got a call from Richard. "You'll be happy to know the restraining order's official," he said. "She can't come within 100 feet of your property." "Good," I said. "Maybe now Maple Ridge can breathe again." "She's moving out too," he added. "House went up for sale this morning." I didn't know whether to celebrate or mourn. That evening, I walked out to the gate. The battlefield that had started everything. The tag gleamed faintly under the porch light. Boundaries matter. I crouched down, running my fingers along the smooth surface. Beneath it, somewhere deep in the hardened mix, still lay her original keys. A symbol of her control, buried by her own arrogance. The irony was beautiful. I thought about digging them up, just to put an end to the metaphor. But then I stopped. Some things deserve to stay buried. Not out of spite, but as reminders. As I stood there, Sam called from his porch. "You ever gonna tell the new owners about the history of that fence?" I smiled. "Maybe I'll let them find out the fun way." He laughed. "You're a cruel man, Daniel." "Just poetic," I said. A cool wind drifted through the street. For the first time in months it carried no tension, just peace. And yet, as I turned to head inside, I noticed something glinting in the flower bed near the curb. A single, shiny key. It wasn't one of mine. I picked it up, holding it to the light. On the handle, etched faintly in worn letters, were the initials KW. A chill ran down my spine. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe, just maybe, some lessons never stay buried as long as we think. I slipped the key into my pocket and closed the gate behind me, letting the lock click softly into place. The key stayed on my desk for a week before I worked up the nerve to move it. It wasn't fear, at least, not exactly. It was curiosity mixed with a faint superstition, like touching something cursed. Every time I passed it, the little metal edge caught the sunlight, flashing as if winking at me. A reminder that Karen's story wasn't finished, not yet. By then, her house had officially sold. The moving trucks came early one Saturday morning. I watched from my porch as two men in gray uniforms carried out boxes labeled kitchen, office, and craft supplies. The blinds were open for once. Through the window, I saw her. The woman herself, packing a final box. She looked different, thinner, paler. Her movements slower, cautious. When she stepped outside, she wore sunglasses even though it was cloudy, and she kept her chin high, refusing to look at anyone. The neighborhood was awake by then. Curtains twitched. Sam pretended to wash his car but really just watched. Kids on bikes slowed down to whisper. It wasn't cruelty, it was fascination. Everyone had lived under her thumb so long that seeing her dethroned felt like watching the end of an empire. When the truck finally pulled away, Karen lingered by the curb for a long moment, glancing toward my house. Our eyes met. She didn't glare. She didn't speak. She just raised one hand like a mock salute, then turned and got into her car. That was the last time I saw her. For a while, life returned to normal. The HOA held elections. Richard became president, and suddenly meetings were about practical things again: sidewalk repairs, trash schedules, neighborhood watch. People actually laughed. The tension that had hung over Maple Ridge evaporated. I fixed the fence she'd obsessed over, reseeded the burned patch of grass, and even started parking my truck in the driveway again. Some evenings, I'd sit on the porch with a beer, watching the sunset slide over the rooftops, grateful for the quiet. Still, the key remained. It wasn't one of the buried ones. I'd checked my records. It didn't match the cut of any known lock I owned. But the initials, KW, were unmistakable. I thought about throwing it out, but something about it made me pause. Like it still had unfinished business. One afternoon, curiosity won. I drove to the storage facility on the edge of town, the one Karen had mentioned months ago when I borrowed her spare keys. The manager recognized her name immediately. Unit 127, he said. Prepaid for 6 months. She cleared it out last week. Mind if I check? I asked. He shrugged. Doors open. She didn't take everything. The inside smelled like dust and detergent. Boxes sat stacked haphazardly, half empty, as if she'd left in a hurry. There were binders, stacks of HOA paperwork, rolls of flyers, and, ironically, a box labeled Community Unity Project. I almost laughed. Then I saw a small safe on the floor in the corner. Old, steel gray, about the size of a microwave. And on its front, a matching keyhole. I took out the key, turned it slowly, and felt the click. Inside were files, photos, and one black notebook labeled Residence Notes. I hesitated before opening it. Something told me this was the raw, unfiltered version of Karen, the one she hid behind bylaws and emails. The first page confirmed it. Daniel Daniels, she'd written in perfect cursive. Uncooperative. Deflects authority. Highly manipulative. Must be corrected. I read on. There were notes on other neighbors too. Sam, Richard, even families I barely knew. Every complaint she'd ever filed, every rumor she'd spread, every imagined infraction, it was all documented here like a diary of obsession. But as the pages went on, the tone shifted. The meticulous handwriting grew shakier. Paragraphs turned into rants. They laugh at me. They need me. Without rules, they'll destroy this place. They don't understand I'm saving them. Then, near the end, a line that stopped me cold. If I lose control, I lose everything. If I can't fix them, maybe I can fix the silence. I closed the book, uneasy. For the first time, I saw the full picture, not the villainous caricature we'd built, but a woman disintegrating under the weight of her own delusions. I left the storage unit without taking anything. The key, though, I kept it. It felt wrong to discard it now, like leaving a story unfinished. Weeks passed. Summer slipped into fall. Maple Ridge thrived. The HOA newsletter came with recipes instead of threats. Neighbors hosted barbecues, kids chalked the sidewalks, and someone even repainted the clubhouse. But every so often, small reminders of Karen would resurface. A neighbor found one of her old violation notices, tucked inside a cookbook. Another received an automated email from her long-deleted HOA account scheduling a non-existent beautification audit. And once, late at night, my motion light clicked on for no reason at all. Nothing appeared on the camera feed. Just the empty street, wind pushing the leaves, the gate glinting faintly under the moon. Then, one evening in October, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it, written in the same looping script I'd seen in her notebook, were 4 words. Some things never set. No signature. I checked the postmark, mailed from 2 towns over. I should have been angry or scared, but I wasn't. The words didn't sound like a threat anymore. They sounded tired, resigned. Maybe she was trying to tell me something. Maybe it was her way of admitting defeat, or confessing that she'd realized how much of herself she'd poured into the cement of this neighborhood, and how impossible it was to scrape off. Either way, I didn't reply. Instead, I walked out to the gate that night, beer in hand, and stared at the faint silver gleam of the tag, Boundaries Matter. The letters had dulled with weather, a thin layer of dust softening their edges. I knelt down and ran my fingers across it. The surface was still hard, cold, unyielding. Beneath it, her original keys slept, untouched and unreachable. And for the first time, I realized it wasn't just her lesson, it was mine. I'd spent months outsmarting her, outmaneuvering her, proving her wrong. But in doing so, I'd let her live rent-free in my head, shaping my days around her chaos. The cement had hardened, yes, but maybe the bitterness inside me hadn't. So I decided to end it properly. I grabbed a small chisel and etched a new line below the old tag. Let go. Simple. Final. The next morning, I called the new homeowners who'd bought Karen's place. A young couple with a golden retriever and too much optimism. I told them everything. The gate, the feud, even the buried keys. The husband laughed. Guess every neighborhood has its legend. Yeah, I said. Just don't feed this one. They invited me over for coffee that weekend. Their house looked brighter already. New curtains, flowers, a welcome mat that read good vibes only. The air smelled like cinnamon and paint. Whatever ghost of Karen lingered there, it had finally lost its grip. When I left, I dropped the KW key into their mailbox without a word. Let the past find its own place to rest. That night, as I locked my gate for the last time before bed, the wind kicked up, scattering leaves across the street. Somewhere, faintly, a chime rang, mine, the one she'd once called invasive. It sounded peaceful now. And just before I went inside, I thought I heard something else too, a distant car door shutting, an engine starting far down the road. Maybe coincidence, maybe memory. Either way, I smiled. Karen had been right about one thing: neighborhoods do need structure. Just not the kind she tried to enforce. Real community is built from the bottom up, handshakes, fences fixed together, laughter shared across driveways. The kind of foundation that doesn't crack under control, but grows stronger with trust. I looked once more at the gate, at the concrete slab that had started and ended it all. For months, it had been a battlefield. Now it was just part of my home again. I raised my beer toward it like a toast. To boundaries, I said quietly. And to moving on. The chimes swayed, the wind shifted, and somewhere deep beneath the ground, the old cement held steady, silent, solid, and at peace at last.